So it's important to note that Islam does not need a Khilafah, and that's agreed upon, mujma' alayh. That's agreed upon, mujma' alayh. That's agreed upon, mujma' alayh.
I do believe that ideally the establishment of a Khilafah is a type of fard kifaya. But we also need to be clear about the level of obligation. How fard kifaya is it? Is it on the top of the list, or is it somewhere lower on the list? And in my humble opinion, it's not on the top 10 or 20 things on the list. And that's why you don't hear me in my rhetoric, in my khutbahs, always bringing up something like a khilafah.
Hudayfa said, what do I do? He said, Ilzam jama'at al-muslimin wa imamuhum. Cling to the group and the imam. And Hudayfa was a genius. He said, وَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُمْ جَمَعَةٌ وَلَا imam. What if there's no group and no imam? And he said, إِذَنْ اِعْتَزَلَ الْفِرَقْ كُلَّهَا. Then avoid all the sects and just be on your own. He didn't say, no, you have to establish the khilafah. It's a fard kifaya, and if nobody's doing it, you have to do it.
We shouldn't always be bringing up the notion of khilafah. Bring it up so that they know of the idea. Bring it up so that they understand there is something. But in my humble opinion, it is not something that is as important as the ibadat and mu'amalat. Yes, it is a fard kifaya, and it's important to talk about, and I have spoken about it, but it's not something that I'm obsessed about. How would you have an Islamic state disconnected from the global system? You can't have banks in there. Disconnected from the UN. You can't have banks in there. Disconnected from the UN. How are you going to have a group of people disconnected from the infrastructure of the world? Will your own people want to live under that type of system? Will your own people want to live under that type of system?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين
لست الأخيرة لكن أخرى وأخرى ورائي ما كنت جرحا جديدا فألف جرح إيذائي لست الأخيرة.
Sa'id bin Zayd was asked, متى بويع لأبي بكر? When was the bay'ah given to Abu Bakr? He said the same day Rasulullah passed away, because كرهوا أن يبقوا بعض يوم وليسوا في جماعة, because the Sahaba did not want to stay for even one day without a jama'ah. So they did it the same day Rasulullah passed away, even before he was buried. You know, when we talk about the importance of Khilafah, Rasulullah passed away, and you had the washing of Rasulullah and the burial of Rasulullah, and we know that the sunnah is to bury a person as fast as possible. The burial of Rasulullah ended up being delayed. He died on Monday, and they say that he was buried Wednesday night, according to some scholars, because the Sahaba radiallahu anhum wanted to sort out the issue of Khilafah first. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, who were before that, before the da'wah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, were the Arab people, were an unruly people, tribes fighting each other, very independent. They did not want to submit to any leader. But now this collective work was so ingrained in them that they considered it to be not appropriate for them to stay even for a day without having an amir who would run their affairs. And they gave that precedence over washing Rasulullah and burying him. And they were discussing this issue even though their hearts were broken because of the death of Rasulullah. They were discussing it the same day Rasulullah passed away. And that shows you the importance of the issue of Khilafah in our life. And the Muslims being in a jama'ah and somebody being in the position of leadership to run and manage their affairs. Now the issue of Khilafah and Khalifa, again, Al-Imam Al-Mawardi, who's considered to be one of the greatest scholars of Islam, the classical scholars of Islam in political issues, he wrote a book called Al-Ahkam Al-Sultaniyah, the laws of governance. He says, فَكَانَتْ الْإِمَامَةِ أَصْلًا عَلَيْهِ اسْتَقَرَّتْ قَوَاعِدِ الْمِلَّةِ. The issue of having an imam means leader, was one of the fundamentals of the religion. And he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ قدرته ندب للأمة زعيما خلف به النبوة وحاط به الملة. Allah Azza wa Jal wanted the Ummah to have a leader who would succeed the prophethood. So the position of Khilafah is so important that he is the successor of prophethood. And he is the one who fulfills the role that the Prophet used to fulfill in his life. And that's why Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radhiallahu anhu was called Khalifat Rasulullah, the successor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. إِلَّمْ تَجِدِينِي فَأْتِي أَبَا بَكْرٍ. If you don't find me, then go to Abu Bakr. He was the deputy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What is the hukum of Khilafah? Is it sunnah? Is it mubah? Is it wajib? What's the hukum of it? Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he comments on the statement made by one scholar, his name is Dawudi, that establishing Khilafah is sunnah mu'akkada. So Ibn Hajar responds to that. Now the evidence that Dawudi uses is the fact that the bay'ah to Abu Bakr wasn't given until hours after Rasulullah passed away. So he said, since they stayed for a few hours without a Khalifa, it means that it is sunnah mu'akkada. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani comments on that and he says, وَتُعُقِّبَ بِالْإِتِّفَاقِ عَلَى فَرْضِيَّتِهَا وبأنهم تركوا لأجل إقامتها أعظم المهمات وهو التشاغل بدفن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حتى فرغوا منها والمدة المذكورة زمن يسير في بعض يوم يغتفر مثله لاجتماع الكلمة. He says, but that is not the view of the scholars. The view of the scholars, and it is their consensus. Ibn Hajar says their consensus that it is mandatory, that it is fard. And to say that because they waited for a few hours, he said, waiting for a few hours to bring together the unity among the Muslims is acceptable. If waiting for a few hours is going to bring the ummah together and unify them, it's acceptable. And this is the fastest possible time they could establish the Khilafah, within a few hours. But Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani makes it very clear that it is fard. And it is the consensus of the Sahaba because they did it before they even buried Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We sometimes establish our religious views based on what is the predominant case around us. So we think because this is how we are now, this is the right way to be. You know, some people now, because there is no imara and khilafah in Islam today, they think that it's absolutely fine and there's no problem in that. Brothers and sisters, if one of the Sahaba was alive today, they would ask Allah Azza wa Jal to take away their soul. They would refuse to live the life that many Muslims are happy to lead today. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, when they were in Mecca, when the da'wah was just starting, and there was only 38 Muslims on the face of the earth, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, it shouldn't be a secret da'wah, we have to make it public. And as soon as the Sahaba reached over 100, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was now starting for a base to establish his government and move to Medina. He could have continued staying in Mecca. He was protected by his uncle Al-Abbas. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not being harmed physically. Yes, there were threats against his life, but his da'wah was going on. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for the last few years of his da'wah in Mecca, was asking for nusrah, asking for support. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they couldn't stand seeing Islam being humiliated. They couldn't stand seeing the Muslims being humiliated. And now this is something perfectly normal and acceptable to some Muslims. This is not a way of life that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum would be happy with. It's not even a way of life that they would be willing to live. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away and they didn't bury him yet, and they are already meeting to discuss the issue of appointing a Khalifa among them. I mean, do you understand the implications of that? How important they viewed this issue. And as a Muslim ummah, we'll continue suffering setbacks and problems as long as we don't sort out this issue. Look at how many family problems exist in this society. Among the Muslims, I'm not talking about the non-Muslims. How many family problems are going around? How many financial problems are going around? And when I say financial problems, a person could be a millionaire, but they're going through financial problems because the rizq is coming from haram. How pure is the rizq that Muslims are making? All of these are issues that cannot be sorted out unless we establish this system. For example, take the issue of mortgage. There's debate, some say haram, some say halal. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you deal with mortgage, you're dealing with something that is haram, riba. And if you stay away from it, then you're paying more in rent. And Muslims want a magical solution for these problems. There is not going to be any solution until you bring back the law of Allah, the hukm of Allah in your life. We are looking for solutions for family problems, problems between the husband and wife, problems between the children and parents. These are not going to be solved unless we are living under an Islamic system. The barakah in living is when it is under the Khilafah of Allah Azza wa Jal. The most blessed time in the history of this ummah was when they were living under the Khilafah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Umar bin Abdul Aziz. So this should be on the mind of everyone, to bring back the law and the hukm of Allah Azza wa Jal. And on the other side, if anybody thinks that Khilafah can be established without the path of jihad, is mistaken. Because Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu says, and we'll talk about his statement in his khutbah, وَمَا تَرَكَ قَوْمٌ الْجِهَادِ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا ذَلُّوا. Any people who leave the mandate of jihad are going to be humiliated. It's the qadr of Allah Azza wa Jal. It's going to happen. There's a narration, Umar ibn Khattab says, مَنْ دُعِيَ إِلَى إِمَارَةٍ مِّنْ غَيْرِ مَشُورَةٍ فَلَا يَحِلُّ لَهُ أَنْ يَقْبَلْ. Whoever is asked to be in a position of leadership without the shura of the Muslims, it is not halal for him to accept it. If you are told, come and be Amir, and it's without the shura of the Muslims, don't get your feet into that pit hole. Because al-imara is mas'uliyah, and you're going to be asked about it on the Day of Judgment. And if it's without the shura of the Muslims, you should not accept it. The bay'ah of Abu Bakr was through the shura of the Muslims. Same thing with the khulafa after that. So we also learned that the khilafah established through bay'ah. And Rasulullah ﷺ says in the hadith, وَمَنْ مَاتَ وَلَيْسَ فِي عُنُقِهِ بَيْعَةٌ مَاتَ مِيتَةً جَاهِلِيَّةً. If you die without a pledge of allegiance to the Imam, you are dying in a state of jahiliyyah. Now this is strictly speaking about the Khalifa too. It's not talking about presidents and kings or local leaders, or it's talking about the Khalifa.
Who do you make bay'ah to?
No, wait. No. I'm Algerian, to Taboun.
To who?
Taboun, Algerian president. He's my president. The hadith in the Prophet said, whoever goes to sleep and he has no bay'ah on his neck, he would die like a day of jahiliyyah. I said to him, what about you?
I have a question on this, Shamsi. I have a question on this.
Yeah.
I'm from Bangladesh.
Yes.
And we have a woman prime minister, very secular. She has nothing to do with Islam. She calls herself a Muslim.
Yeah.
Should I give bay'ah to her?
Go ask scholars, not me. Who said no?
Bay'ah to a woman.
No, I'm asking you.
Bay'ah to a woman. What's this? Who said allowed for bay'ah to a woman?
I'm asking Muhammad, who scholar said no?
No, bay'ah to a woman.
I understand that.
The bay'ah, al-bay'ah al-uzma, this bay'ah that Rasulullah is referring to, is about al-khilafah. And since there is no khilafah now, then we are living in an exception of this rule. Until the khalifa exists, then the hadith would apply again.
He didn't say, no, you have to establish the khilafah. It's a fard kifaya, and if nobody's doing it, you have to do it.
Yes, it is a fard kifaya, but it's not something that I'm obsessed about. How fard kifaya is it? Is it on the top of the list, or is it somewhere lower on the list? It's not on the top 10 or 20 things on the list.